Greetings and welcome to our Faith at Work series. We're so glad to have you join us once again for this wonderful series in which we are having conversations with members of the congregation as well as people on staff at Shepherd of the Hills, and just talking to them about vocation, about not only their work, but how they see their faith at work in their work. So it's been a wonderful conversation that we've had over the last number of weeks, and today we're very pleased to have with us a very good friend and a wonderful doctor, Dr. Peter Miller. And so we want to say welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you.
Great to have you here, and thanks for doing this today. And why don't you just tell us what kind of doctor are you? What's your specialty here?
So I like to think I'm a good one, firstly.
Okay, that's a good start.
But I'm a kidney specialist, so our patients are actually pretty debilitated and quite ill. They're on dialysis or they've had an organ transplant, and they just have a high burden of comorbid diseases, heart disease, diabetes. So our folks are pretty sick, especially when some of them are on a machine to stay alive.
Yeah. And I know when you told me what kind of doctor you are, its official name is a nephrologist.
Correct?
That's
correct.
That was a new term for me.
There you go. One more for you.
Yeah, exactly. So what was it that attracted you to just medicine in general, and maybe to this kind of practice of medicine? Anything that sticks out?
Actually, when I was originally in college, I didn't want to be a doctor at all. It's really my advisor that saw that I was a really good student, I had interest, who said to me, you should really think about becoming a doctor. Yeah. And so I did, and that was my move at the time. So I don't know it was any great epiphany. It was just a little bit of a nudge from an instructor, a teacher, professor that saw something that maybe I didn't.
Right.
As far as nephrology goes, while I was in medical school, I worked in a lab with a nephrologist. And as I trained, I always had that little bit of that background of kidney disease in there. There were things about physiology that at the time were just so appealing because they made so much sense in terms of how you took care of patients. It's not always the case in all parts of medicine. So that had a big appeal to it.
Yeah. It's interesting how I think we don't often think of our work as maybe a calling. Maybe that has always been kind of in the spiritual realm, so to speak, but I think even the nudging of that advisor or that professor or teacher that kind of nudging in a certain direction is, I think there's a sense of outer call. I think there's a sense of people on the outside that kind of see something in us that maybe we don't see in ourselves, and
I think that's cool. Absolutely true.
Yeah. So what has been rewarding about being a doctor for all these years? What have you found rewarding?
Barring the fatigue and some of the changes that happen in healthcare, the most rewarding part is clearly taking care of patients. And patients that actually really want you to take care of them, that will work with you. Because those are patients where you can really have an impact. And that's fun, whether you see them in hard times when they're on a dialysis machine, and then later on you see them after a transplant, you realize that's been transformational for their life because they're like a regular person now, except for a bunch of pills they need to take, but that was true before.
Yeah.
And so kind of working with them and maybe shepherding them through those moments is really quite powerful.
Is it hard, because I know you and I know you're a deep feeling person, is it hard to sometimes just work hard at sort of those boundaries of doctor-patient in terms of the attachment that you get with different patients at all?
Yeah, I think, as is in life, there's some people that are closer to you and resonate more with you. But we all have a little bit of that, and I think it's especially telling when we have patients that are quite sick, and then, in one period of time, several of them die. I think the whole community of the clinic, I think the providers, whether they admit it or not, they are affected by that. Yeah. And they have to be, and it's actually probably good that they are.
So when you're working with patients, I assume that you get to know their families probably too a little bit, or is it more just patient on patient?
Some more than others.
Mhm.
The demographic of dialysis patients is broad, and it's actually quite interesting to see how some families are just so fragmented and so separate. But there are those that are quite tight together where the children are involved in the care. And those are fun because you see that there's support for those people. The
Yeah.
others require a little bit more attention and, and are therefore more work. But absolutely, when you get to see a patient or that's gotten through dialysis and got a transplant and pregnant and has a family, it's like, realize you look back and say, this has really been good.
Yeah.
It takes a few of those. Just a
Right.
few of those can help you run through all the rest, I found.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, we need those, and
Absolutely.
sometimes when we need them, things the most, God senses that, and it's kind of provided for us too. So,
Yeah.
so when have you? Has there been any kind of specific experience or experiences that you've had where you've really kind of felt or sensed the presence of God in the work that you're doing?
I think, doctors like others run through their day, especially now, and you kind of lose sight of the fact, as we often do, about the gravity of somebody's health issues and then how it impacts them. And there are those moments, usually times of real severe illness and crisis on the border of death or dying, that I think you have a pause, and I think your faith helps you through that. And you see how some people actually struggle with that, sometimes with their faith, sometimes without their faith. But it takes me back to one patient I had, and your early years are different than your later years. I think you transition in terms of your thinking, your faith, and how you embrace it, and how open you are about it in the later years, which has actually been a really great thing. But I had one patient where I do procedures on. I remember as we would get ready in the operating room or procedure area, we're all masked and gowned for sterile procedure, and he's draped, and we're doing this procedure on his arm. And he says, "Stop. We're going to say a prayer." And he proceeds to say a prayer, how he wants God to take care of him and oversee the good work of the people and Dr. Miller, that his hands can move in a good way to heal him. And I thought, this is actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
Initially, it's a little awkward, but then you realize for this person, their faith was powerfully important. And to see how other people reacted to that in a positive way was, I think, a really fun thing. Because I think a lot of times that part of us and our faith, as you said, it's not really amnesia in this instance. It's more, it falls into the background in the midst of the day-to-day. And this had a way of an important time for this human being to elevate it to a consciousness that everybody shared.
Yeah. And it must have been kind of one of those really interesting experiences where you're really on the receiving end of his prayer.
Yeah, there you go. It's more about Dr. Miller.
Yeah.
Made me wonder if he was perhaps a bit worried.
But you're always on the giving end, and to be on the receiving end is, that's not always easy, but that's kind of a grace moment then, because grace is all about being on the receiving end of kind of unexpected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody's really grateful and wanted to share.
Yeah. That's cool. Any other kind of God moments at all, Peter, that you can think about?
Yeah, I can think of this one that I think I told you about before. We all get into this rut where we're running and taking care of patients and the drudgery of day-to-day work and the things you have to get done. And, we had a homeless patient who came into the hospital, and, it's 5 o'clock and it's in the midst of everything else. And there's this, this stress. And then you realize that, you're a little bit irritated and agitated, and so people should take better care of themselves. And you go, and I examined him, it's very nice. It's just an inconvenient hour, time, place in the midst of a hectic day. And as I walk out, he says to me, "Hey, Doc," because he kind of sensed, I think, that there was this kind of level of, brusqueness about me. Yeah. And I went back in the room and I said, "What?" And he said to me, "Thanks." I said, that's God talking.
Gotcha.
Yep. Next time I think about it.
Oh, that's great. So what are the challenges that there's always challenges to any vocation, but what are some of the challenges that you face just in terms of maybe obstacles or just, things that arise that you just have to work hard at kind of overcoming, I think, in your work?
You know, I think in patients that are really desperately ill, that's a tough time. You know, faith is there for a lot of people. I think it's hard for healthcare providers to kind of engage at that level because we're always very much, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, kind of a bit impersonal to people. So I would say it's tough sometimes to take that step where you can say openly to somebody, listen, I feel bad for you, I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
It's not part of our day-to-day, actually.
Right.
I think there are places in hospital systems more like Seton where they've tried to embrace that or encourage that. But as you can imagine, that's not something that's easily done publicly, especially by a healthcare provider. But sometimes the family will welcome it.
Yeah. In your training, as you went through medical school and residency and things like that early on, was there any kind of conversation about the power of spirituality in the midst of kind of the whole health?
Not so much on the religious side, I think, but on the side of community and support groups for patients at that time. I don't know if that's changed any in the current. I think there's so many other forces and efforts at way simultaneously, but I don't know that there's ever a big conversation about faith. We all had clergy in the hospital, and we all called clergy. And we did ask patients if they wanted to see clergy. Of course, that always makes people a little bit nervous, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I think actually that part's probably gotten a little bit lighter. And I do think there's a bit more of an openness and receptiveness to that now, whereas when I first trained long ago, maybe less so.
I've really seen that trend. I mean, in my experience of going into hospital rooms with parishioners, that it's been less and less so these days, with COVID. But it used to be that basically I think I was almost like in the way, the doctor, because I mean they're making their rounds and they've got a lot of rounds to make, and I understand that. But I never felt really well received by a lot of medical folks when I first started in the ministry, and I first started doing a lot of hospital calling and things like that. But I have seen that probably in the last 10, 15 years. I've really seen that trend very different. And I've been warmly embraced by many doctors and when I've been in there at the same time. And I've even had some times where the doctors prayed with us. So I think that's been really important. I think it's been really a neat thing. And I think for a patient there, where you're visiting them and they have a doctor who's praying with you, that's pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, definitely different.
Yeah, definitely different. Yeah.
Well, I think as the conversation more and more has become about quality of life and end of life, I think what's become apparent is you need other people to be involved in that, family and clergy, and they can be a great help to the patient and actually to the family, therefore to the physician who's trying to get them to really think about some of these other dimensions about, their what's now called a plan of care. What are we going to do? What can we do? What can't we do?
Yeah. So you've been, you and Linda, your wife, have been connected with Shepherd of the Hills for a number of years, and how has that connection been, provided a sense of support and encouragement for you in your own vocation as a doctor? Or has it?
Well, I mean, I think it has. I think, to be honest, a lot of that is, as I viewed on me, is like, I think when you came, there was a lot of talk about being fluent with your faith and being more involved and thoughtful about it. And I think at that time I was ready for that. Whereas before, I think I was a bit more of a pedestrian, probably suffered a lot more from what you described in your sermon Sunday as, amnesia of my faith once I left the church. And I reflect back on it and I think why did I do that? And so I think the exploration more recently of it, embracing it, learning more about it with Ignite has been a real positive for me. Yeah. I think it's changed my thinking about a lot of things. I think it makes me better, and therefore it makes me better at my job, take care of patients.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed being in the same small group as you and Linda, and the conversations that we have had. Sometimes when we do the Sunday night small group, and I've had a long day and things like that of being up really early and I'm like, oh man,
You're not alone to have had that feeling.
Yes, but then you go and then you're with each other and you're with community and in community, and then for a number of years you led the conversation and stuff, and which I've always enjoyed, and you just felt really re-energized, by the gift of being in community and learning from one another and listening and having these conversations.
Yeah, I share that view. I think despite a busy, long day, what's most fatiguing oftentimes are the emotional dimensions to what our day-to-day is, not so much the physical. Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of tired, and it needs a different kind of a treatment, mm-hmm. which is, mm-hmm. having the group and the community people share about some of their experiences really helps. Yeah, I think offload a bit of that, lighten the burden.
Right. And you kind of see and you really feel a sense of that you're there for each other then as well.
True.
And you're getting a lot out of it, but it's good to remember that, that other person is also benefiting from you being there as well. So one other question that I think is kind of interesting, it wasn't on kind of what I sent you, but as you think about, work and vocation, and vocation is generally that wonderful Lutheran understanding of whatever we are doing, we do, whatever work we're doing, whether it's at home changing the diaper of a baby, or whether it's doing open heart surgery, whatever we are doing, we're doing, and we should do to the glory of God. So how does that whole understanding of vocation? What do you think of that? I mean, does that resonate with you at all, that sense of calling?
So. Mm-hmm. Because it's not this dramatic moment, that you have every day when you head out. And so if you just raises your consciousness about, what your faith is, and ask yourself, is this present in my day-to-day, and how is it? How can it be more present in my day-to-day? I think that's an important question for people, because work does get very mundane. Mm-hmm. And there's some times where it's very, very tedious. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you are. The question comes up, why am I doing this? Right. And then that's sometimes to degrade how you're doing it. But I think being attentive to the higher purpose will always make you say, no, I need to do well at this. I need to be good at this. Yeah. There are other dimensions to what I am that should show themselves in my day-to-day. And those days, as you said, kind of ordinary. It's hard to feel that when you're changing a diaper.
Right. Exactly. But you see kind of a higher purpose and the sense of, I always remember a great line from old movie, Chariots of Fire. And Eric Liddell is running along he's a runner and he's running the Olympics and he's going to be a missionary in China. And he said a line, he said, whenever I run, I feel the pleasure of God. And I've always loved that line, because it's kind of like, in our work, in our vocation, if we could remember that when whatever we're doing, that we can feel the pleasure of God in what we're doing.
Yeah, even though it can be tedious and exhausting.
Exactly.
I think
and most of it is.
You let it in. It is.
Yeah, exactly. So how's that sense of vocational calling? How do you relate that then to what you've been doing for your career?
You mean, is it kind of?
I mean, does that elevate? I mean, does that kind of, in a sense, give you a sense? Is there a sense of calling that you've felt then with?
I think it's as I told my kids. You reach these times in your life where you feel like you're on the treadmill, the hamster wheel, and it's again not as dramatic revelation, but you realize you get up the next day and now one foot in front of the other, and you get out there again. But it's those moments, those little glimpses in there, where you really, I think, feel that what you're describing, that real connection. It's just a matter of the balance and how much external things are coming at you, I think, that just oftentimes overwhelm or reduce that, just because we're human. There's only so much I think we can cope with at a time, and reaching down to that place is tough. But when it happens, I think and maybe that's good, because at that moment, it's very real. And you remember it, and it's timely. We live on those glimpses, that's for sure. Absolutely. It sustains us.
So the last question I always ask in these conversations is there anything else?
That's right. What would you do differently or say differently? What did I forget to ask you? Is that right?
Or or is there anything else that as you thought about this that just even in the course of the conversation that occurs to you? If not, that's fine. But
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I kind of feel I've let you down with that line, but
no, that's you haven't.
But no, I don't think.
Sometimes it elicits a response, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's good. So,
yeah, not in the current state of my head, which happens from time to time. Perhaps more caffeine will.
Right. Yeah, you'll think of something later.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Peter, so much for kind of sharing your time with us, and thanks for letting us be in your office here and have this conversation with you, so we can kind of see see your digs here and be a part of your life in this way. And so we appreciate you and appreciate the work that you do and the ministry that you do as in your healing ministry, because that's what you're a part of, with your presence, with your skills, and with just who you are.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be appreciated. Thank you for helping me and others with the fluency of our faith.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There's more work to be done.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Job security.
We all need help. All right. Thank you. So once again, we're glad that you were here, and hopefully you enjoyed this conversation as you've enjoyed all the conversations that we've had the pleasure of having. And we hope that you will join us the next Wednesday at 7 o'clock in the evening for another Faith at Work conversation with either Pastor Lauren or myself. So thank you once again. May God bless you, and be well and stay well.